A police car pulled up in front of Grandma Bessie's house, and out stepped Grandpa Morris. The officer politely explained, "Ma'am, your husband said he got lost in the park and couldn't find his way home." Grandma Bessie stared at Morris and said, "Lost? You've been going to that park for 30 years. How'd you get lost today?" Leaning in close so the officer couldn't hear, Grandpa whispered, "I wasn't lost. I was just too tired to walk home." An elderly woman decided it was time to have her portrait painted. She instructed the artist, "Please paint me wearing diamond earrings, a diamond necklace, emerald bracelets, a ruby brooch, and a gold Rolex." The artist, puzzled, replied, "But you're not wearing any of those things." "I know," she said with a sly smile. "It's for after I'm gone. If I die before my husband, I know he'll remarry quickly, and I want his new wife to lose her mind searching for the jewelry." The blonde wife came home from her first day commuting into the city. Her husband noticed she was looking a little peaked and asked, "Honey, are you feeling all right?" "Not really," she replied. "I'm nauseated from sitting backward on the train." "Poor dear," he said. "Why didn't you ask the person sitting across from you to switch seats for a while?" "I couldn't," she replied. "There was no one there." A blonde daughter realized her thong was missing. Frustrated, her red-headed mother thought for a moment, then had an idea. She let their dog sniff her daughter's sensitive area and said, "Go find it, boy." Hours later, she turned on the news. "Breaking news, a rabid dog has been put down after biting 30 men in a very sensitive area." A petrol station owner in Ireland was struggling with sales, so he decided to get creative. He put up a big, bold sign outside. "Free fun with owner's wife. Fill up." Paddy, always up for a good deal, pulled in, filled his tank to the brim and marched up to the owner. "All right, I'm all filled up. How do I claim the offer?" The owner smiled. "Simple, mate. Just pick a number between 1 and 10. If you guess it right, you win." Paddy thought for a moment. "All right then. 8. The owner sighed and shook his head. "Oof, close. It was 7. Maybe next time." Paddy grumbled, but drove off. A week later, he came back, this time with his buddy John. They both filled up, and Paddy, determined to win, walked up again. "Okay, let's try this again. The number is 2 exclamation mark." The owner grinned. "Ah, unlucky. It was 3 this time. So close, but no prize today." As they drove away, John leaned over and whispered, "Paddy, I think this whole thing is a scam. He's never going to give out the reward." Paddy smirked and shrugged. "Oh, it's real, all right. My wife won twice last week." An elderly lady dialed her local bank, but instead she was connected to a call center. "Is this the High Street branch?" she asked. "No, madam," replied the operator. "All calls are now handled centrally as part of our company policy." "Well, I need to speak to the branch," she insisted. "Madam, if you tell me your query, I'm sure I can assist," the operator said, confidently. The lady hesitated. "I don't think you can help. I really need to speak to the branch." The operator pressed on. "I assure you there's nothing the branch can do that I can't handle for you." With a sigh, the elderly woman replied, "All right then. Can you check the counter and see if I left my gloves there this morning?" An elderly retired Marine fighter pilot moved into a retirement community where eligible men were in high demand. After just a week, he went to confession and said, "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. Last week, I was with 7 different women." The priest thought for a moment and then said, "Take 7 lemons, squeeze them into a glass, and drink the juice all at once." The pilot asked, "Will that cleanse me of my sins, Father?" "No," the priest replied, "but it'll wipe that crap-eating grin off your face." A husband and wife went out for dinner at a fancy 5-star restaurant. When the waiter brought their meal, the husband cheerfully said, "Our food is here, let's dig in." The wife, raising an eyebrow, gently reminded him, "Honey, don't you always say a prayer before eating at home?" The husband smiled and replied, "That's true, but at home, I'm the chef." Joe woke up one morning and reached for his wife, but she was already up, busy in the kitchen making breakfast. Not wanting to ruin the mood by getting out of bed, he called over his little boy and handed him a note to deliver. "The tent pole is up. The canvas is spread. Forget about breakfast. Come back to bed." A few minutes later, the boy returned with his wife's reply. "Take the tent pole down, roll the canvas away. The monkey's not feeling well. No circus today." Joe wasn't giving up that easily. He scribbled another note and sent it back. "The tent pole's still up and the canvas still spread. So drop what you're doing and come give me head." Her response came swiftly. "I know that your pole's the best in the land, but I'm busy right now, so just use your hand." A man and his wife were relaxing in the living room when he said, "Just so you know, I never want to be in a vegetative state, dependent on a machine and fluids from a bottle. If that ever happens, just pull the plug." His wife smiled, got up, gently kissed him on the forehead, then unplugged the TV and tossed out all of his beer. Once upon a time, there was a woman married to a man named Steve, who was, to put it politely, insufferable. Steve complained about everything: the weather, the food, the neighbors, his back pain. You name it, he griped about it. One day, he took his mule down to the creek, still grumbling about something. Well, the mule had heard enough, one solid kick, and bam! Steve was gone. At the funeral, the widow stood by the casket as mourners passed by. Every time a man spoke to her, she nodded yes. But whenever a woman whispered to her, she shook her head no. Curious, the minister finally asked, "Ma'am, why are you nodding yes to the men but no to the women?" She sighed and said, "The men all tell me, I'm so sorry for your loss. And I nod and say, yes, I'll be fine." "And the women?" the minister asked. She smirked. "They keep asking if the mule is for sale." John O'Reilly raised his beer at the pub and proudly declared, "Here's to spending the rest of me life between the legs of me wife." The pub erupted in laughter, and John took home the prize for the best toast of the night. That evening, he strutted through the front door and told his wife, Mary, "Guess what, love? I won the prize for the best toast at the pub." "Oh, did you now?" Mary said. "And what exactly was this fine toast of yours?" Thinking quickly, John smiled and said, "Here's to spending the rest of me life sitting in church beside me wife." Mary beamed. "Ah, John, that's a lovely sentiment." The next day, Mary bumped into one of John's drinking buddies on the street corner. With a cheeky grin, the man said, "Mary, you should have heard John's toast at the pub the other night. It was about you." I know, Mary said, and I'll admit, I was surprised. After all, he's only been in there twice in the last 4 years, once when I dragged him by the ears, and the other time when he fell asleep. Tim finally decided to marry his long-time girlfriend. One evening shortly after the honeymoon, he was in the garage organizing his golf clubs when his new wife walked in and watched him silently. After a while, she broke the silence. "Tim, now that we're married, maybe it's time you quit golfing. You spend so much time on the course, and I'm sure you could sell your clubs for a good price." Tim froze, his face horrified. "What's wrong, darling?" she asked, concerned. "For a second," he said, "you sounded just like my ex-wife." "Ex-wife?" she shouted. "I didn't know you were married before." "I wasn't," he replied. Two elderly residents of a Florida mobile home park, a widower and a widow, had known each other for years. One evening during a community supper, they sat across from each other. As the meal progressed, the widower worked up the courage and asked, "Will you marry me?" After a thoughtful pause, she smiled and replied, "Yes. Yes, I will." They shared a lovely evening and went their separate ways. The next morning, the widower was troubled. He couldn't remember if she had said yes or no. Nervously, he called her and confessed, "I'm so sorry, but my memory isn't what it used to be. Last night, when I asked if you'd marry me, did you say yes or no?" She laughed warmly and said, "I said yes, and I meant it with all my heart." Then, with a chuckle, she added, "And I'm so glad you called because I couldn't remember who asked me." A blonde woman came in for a routine physical at the doctor's office. "There you go," said the nurse as she handed her a urine cup. "The bathroom is over there on your left. The doctor will see you in a few minutes." A few minutes later, the lady came out of the bathroom. She hands an empty container back to the nurse. With a relieved look on her face, she says, "Thank you. But they had a toilet in there, so I didn't need this after all." A nun was teaching Sunday school one morning when she asked her class, "When you die and go to heaven, which part of your body goes first?" Little Susie eagerly raised her hand. "I think it's your hands." The nun smiled. "And why do you think that, Susie?" Susie replied, "Because when you pray, you hold your hands together and God takes them first." "What a beautiful answer," the nun said, nodding approvingly. Then, of course, little Johnny raised his hand. "Sister, I think it's your legs." The nun frowned. "Now, Johnny, why would you think that?" Johnny shrugged and said, "Well, I walked past Mommy and Daddy's room last night, and Mommy had her legs straight up in the air yelling, 'Oh God, I'm coming.' If Dad hadn't been holding her down, we'd have lost her for sure." An elderly man was stretched out across 3 seats in a movie theater. The usher noticed and leaned in. "Sir, you're only allowed 1 seat." The man groaned but didn't move. Frustrated, the usher said, "If you don't get up, I'll call the manager." Still, the man groaned in pain. Moments later, the manager and usher tried to move him but failed. Finally, they called the police. The officer arrived and asked, "What's your name?" "Fred." The man groaned. "And where are you from, Fred?" In agony, Fred replied, "The balcony." While he was there, he received a letter from his girlfriend. "Dear John, I can no longer continue our relationship. The distance between us is too great. I must confess that I have cheated on you twice, and this situation is not fair for either of us. I'm really sorry. Love, Elizabeth. P.S. Please return the picture you have of me. The Marine, his feelings hurt, asked his fellow Marines for any snapshots they had of mothers, sisters, girlfriends, cousins, ex-girlfriends, or aunts. After a while, he had obtained a sizable collection, and so he stuffed all 35 of them into an envelope, including the picture of Elizabeth, along with this letter. Elizabeth, I can't quite remember which one you are. Please take your picture from the pile and return the rest. Take care, John. Who, after examining him, says, "You have some problems with your heart, but if you take these tablets, I think it will be okay." So the doctor gives the man the tablets and the patient asks, "Do I have to take them every day?" "No," replies the doctor. "Take one on Monday, skip Tuesday, take one on Wednesday, skip Thursday, and go on like that." 2 weeks later, the doctor is walking down the street and he sees the patient's wife. "Hello, Mrs. Murphy," he says. "How's your husband?" "Oh, he died of a heart attack," says Mrs. Murphy. "I'm very sorry to hear that," says the doctor. "I thought if he took those tablets, he would be all right." "Oh, the tablets were fine," says Mrs. Murphy. "It was all the bloody skipping that killed him." He walked in, turned on the lights, and looked around. No one else was there. As he was about to turn everything off and go back home, an old farmer walked in, covered in snow. The pastor said, "Oh, hello, Joe. Looks like nobody else could make it. I guess we won't have a service today." The old farmer looked at him for a few seconds and said, "Well, Reverend, I know I am just an old farmer, but I can tell you this. If I take a load of hay out to the field to feed my cattle and only one cow shows up, I still feed it." The pastor, embarrassed, said, "Of course you are right. I will go get ready." So the pastor started the service and, being inspired by the farmer's faith and dedication, preached fervently for a full 2 hours. When the service was over, the pastor went over to the farmer and said, "So, Joe, I hope you enjoyed today's sermon." The old farmer looked at him, shook his head and said, "Reverend, if I go out to feed the cattle and only one cow shows up, I still feed it, but I don't give it the whole load." A pissed-off wife was complaining about her husband spending all his free time in a bar. So, one night, he took her along with him. "What'll you have?" he asked. "Oh, I don't know." "The same as you, I suppose," she replied. So, the husband ordered beer and threw his down in one shot. His wife watched him, then took a sip from her glass and immediately spat it out. "Yuck! That's terrible!" she spluttered. "I don't know how you can drink this stuff." "Well, there you go," cried the husband. "And you think I'm out enjoying myself every night." The man checked his speed and saw he was going 30 miles per hour. He thought, "Am I crazy? Or is this chicken keeping pace with me at 30 miles per hour?" So he sped up 40 miles per hour, and to his surprise, the chicken kept running right next to his car. "This can't be right," the man thought. "No chicken can run this fast." So he sped up to 50 miles per hour. The chicken, amazingly, kept pace with his car. The man looked closely at the chicken, and he saw it also had 3 legs. A 3-legged chicken running 50 miles per hour. Am I dreaming? How can this be real? So the man sped up to 60 miles per hour. The chicken also sped up and kept pace with his car. Then, to the man's astonishment, passed his car and ran a few yards ahead. then suddenly turned hard, left down another road without slowing down. The man hit the brakes and turned down the road to follow the chicken. But the chicken was out of sight. But a little ways down the road, the man saw a farmer out to get his mail. The man stopped next to the farmer and said, "Hey, did you just see a three-legged chicken come tearing down this road at 60 miles per hour?" The farmer looked at the man and said, "Yup, I saw him. He was one of mine." "One of yours?" said the man, incredulous. "Yup," said the farmer. "You see, I raise three-legged chickens. I like to eat the drumstick. My wife likes to eat the drumstick. And now our little boy likes to eat the drumstick. So I got tired of us fighting over them and decided to use some selective breeding until I got three-legged chickens." "That's amazing," said the man. "Well, congratulations on your successful breeding program. And how do they taste?" "Well," said the farmer, "I don't know, I've never been able to catch one." An old man applies for a woodcutter job, but the boss looks him up and down skeptically. "You're too old for this kind of work," the boss says. The old man smirks. "I can cut down any tree with a single swing." To prove it, he steps outside, takes a mighty swing at a 5-foot tree, and boom, it's down. The boss raises an eyebrow. The old man moves on to a 10-foot tree. Same result. Then a 30-footer. No problem. Finally, the old man approaches an 80-foot redwood, swings his axe and crash. It falls like a toothpick. The boss, now speechless, stammers, "Where did you learn to chop like that?" The old man shrugs. "Practiced in the Sahara forest." "The Sahara Desert?" the boss corrects. The old man grins. "Sure, that's what they call it now." An old man, famed for his wisdom, was approached by a curious young man. "Sir," the young man began, "what's the secret to a long and happy life?" The old man leaned in and said with authority, "3 things. First, eat healthy and exercise. Your body's not a dumpster. Second, stick with people who don't drive you insane. And third, keep your brain busy. Netflix doesn't count." The young man, thoroughly impressed, asked, "Wow, how old are you, sir?" With a sly grin, the old man replied, 100 years old. Stunned, the young man gasped, "What's the real secret to living that long?" The old man chuckled, "Oh, I just lie about my age. I'm 78. A man calls his wife and says, "Honey, my boss invited me to China for a fishing trip. It's a great chance for a promotion. Can you pack me clothes for a week? Set out my rod and tackle box, and don't forget my new blue silk pajamas. I'll grab everything from home before leaving." The wife, suspicious but obliging, follows his instructions perfectly. A week later, the husband returns, tired but pleased. "How was the trip? Catch anything good?" the wife asks. "Lots, salmon, bluegill, even swordfish. But why didn't you pack my blue silk pajamas?" She smiles and says, "I did. They're in your tackle box." When does life begin? A debate with a twist. A priest confidently declared, "The Bible says life begins at conception." Jeremiah 1:5. "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you." This is God's truth. The doctor chuckled and countered, "Impossible! Life begins at birth, with the first breath of air. That's science." As their heated debate drew a crowd, an old man nearby chimed in with a grin. "You're both wrong. Life truly begins when your kids finally move out of the house." Years later, they get back together to discuss the gifts they were able to give their elderly mother for her 90th birthday. The first said, I built a big house for our mother. The second said, I sent her a Mercedes with a driver. The third smiled and said, I've got you both beat. You know how Mom enjoys the Bible, and you know she can't see very well. I sent her a brown parrot that can recite the entire Bible. It took 20 monks in a monastery 12 years to teach him. I had to pledge to contribute $100,000 a year for 10 years. But it was worth it. Mom just has to name the chapter and verse, and the parrot will recite it. Soon thereafter, Mom sent out her letters of thanks. Milton, she wrote the first son. The house you built is so huge. I live in only one room, but I have to clean the whole house. Marvin, she wrote to another, I am too old to travel. I stay home all the time, so I never use the Mercedes. And the driver is so rude. Dearest Melvin, she wrote to her third son, you were the only son to have the good sense to know what your mother likes. That chicken was delicious. The man said to the dentist, Doc, I'm in a hurry. I have 2 buddies sitting out in my car waiting for us to go play golf. So forget about the anesthetic and just pull the tooth and be done with it. The man continues, we have a 10 a.m. tea time at the best golf course in town, and it's 9:30 already. I don't have time to wait for the anesthetic to work. The dentist thought to himself, my goodness, this is surely a very brave man asking to have his tooth pulled without using anything to kill the pain. So the dentist asked him, which tooth is it, sir? The man turned to his wife and said, open your mouth, honey, and show him. Many years ago, a wealthy woman with a passion for antiques came across a beautiful vase during her travels. She loved it so much that she decided to paint her entire display room the exact same color. She offered a large reward to anyone who could create the perfect matching paint. Painters from all over tried, but no one could get it just right. One day, a painter arrived, examined the vase for just a moment, and confidently claimed he could match it. True to his word, he delivered the perfect color, impressing the woman and securing the job. His success made him famous, and he built a thriving business. Years later, as he was retiring, he handed the business to his son. Dad, the son asked, I have to know, how did you match that paint so perfectly? The old man leaned in and whispered, I painted the vase. 3 technicians guys go into an interview for a job at the local telephone company. They were all 3 great candidates and very well qualified. The boss brings them into the office and says, okay, you 3 look the best on paper, but I gotta know if you have what it takes for the day-to-day work. So, I'm gonna give you 1 day to impress me. Set as many telephone poles as you can, and report back tomorrow. They all 3 go to work setting poles and return the next day into the boss's office. The boss asks one by one how many they set. The first guy set 13. Wow, 13! That is impressive. The boss tells him happily. The second guy set 9. Well, said the boss, not as good as the first guy, but still it is impressive. He turns to the third guy. How many did you set? The boss asks. 2. The man replies triumphantly, his blonde hair waving in the wind. 2! That's it? The manager was shocked. That's barely any. What were you doing all day? Well, I didn't want to have to be a snitch. But these other guys, they only put theirs halfway in the ground. A timekeeper at a factory had one important job, blowing the whistle for the lunch break exactly at noon. Every day she watched her timepiece carefully, and when the clock struck 12, she blew the whistle. One day, she accidentally bumped her watch and worried that it might be slightly off. Not wanting to risk mistakes, she decided to visit the town's clockmaker to have it set properly. At the shop, she explained her job and how important it was to keep accurate time. The clockmaker reassured her, "No need to worry. I set my watch by the clocks in the back, and those are always correct, because I adjust them every Sunday when the church bells ring at 6 a.m. Feeling confident, she left the shop until a thought struck her. How does the church know exactly when it's 6 a.m.? Curious, she went to the church and found the bell ringer. "How do you know when to ring the bells?" she asked. "How do you make sure you have the correct time?" The bell ringer smiled and said, "Oh, that's easy. I just check my watch every day at noon, right when the factory whistle blows for lunch." Little Johnny is always the target of teasing from the other boys in the neighborhood, who like to call him stupid. Their favorite trick is to offer him a choice between a nickel and a dime, and Johnny always takes the nickel. One day, after Johnny takes the nickel yet again, a neighbor pulls him aside and says, "Johnny, those boys are making fun of you. Don't you know a dime is worth more than a nickel, even though the nickel's bigger?" Johnny grins and replies, "Well, if I took the dime, they'd stop doing it. But so far, I've made $20. A young boy was cycling with a basket of eggs when he hit a stone, causing him to fall along with the bike, and the eggs broke. A crowd quickly gathered, offering unsolicited advice as usual. Why weren't you being more careful? You were cycling too casually without paying attention. As the boy looked disheartened, an old man stepped forward, saw what had happened, and said, "This poor boy now has to answer to the shop owner. Don't worry, I'll help him as best I can." The old man handed the boy 500 rupees and added, "These people are kind-hearted. They'll give advice, but they'll also help with money. Let them contribute." Moved by the old man's words, the onlookers chipped in, and soon the boy had collected more money than the value of the broken eggs. One curious bystander asked, "If the old man hadn't been here, I wonder what difficulties you would have faced with your boss." The boy smiled and replied, "Sir, that old man is the shop owner where I work." A woman at the supermarket found herself trailing a grandfather with his unruly grandson. The child was screaming for sweets, biscuits, and everything in sight, but the grandfather remained calm, saying in a steady voice, "Easy, William. We'll be done soon. Stay calm, boy." When the child had another outburst, the grandfather repeated softly, "It's okay, William. Just a few more minutes, and we'll be out of here. Hang in there." At checkout, the boy threw items out of the cart, yet the grandfather maintained his composure. "Relax, William. Don't get upset. We'll be home in 5 minutes. Stay cool, buddy." Outside, as the man loaded groceries and the boy into the car, the woman approached him, impressed. "I couldn't help but admire how patient you were. You stayed so calm, even with all the chaos. William is lucky to have a grandpa like you." The grandfather chuckled and replied, "Thanks, but I'm William. The little terror's name is Kevin." Jim, an elderly farmer in Florida, owned a beautiful farm with a large pond out back. Over the years, he had turned the area into a relaxing spot with picnic tables, horseshoe courts, and fruit trees. One evening, Jim decided to visit the pond and pick some fruit, carrying a 5-gallon bucket with him. As he approached, he heard laughter and splashing. Curious, he moved closer and saw a group of young women skinny dipping in his pond. Noticing him, the women shrieked and swam to the deep end. One yelled, "We're not coming out until you leave." Jim frowned and replied, "Don't worry. I didn't come here to watch you swim or force you out." Lifting his bucket, he added with a sly grin, "I just came to feed the alligator." Some old men still know how to think on their feet. An artist asked the gallery owner if there had been any recent interest in his paintings, which happened to be on display. "I have good news and bad news," the gallery owner replied. "The good news is that a gentleman inquired about your work and wondered if it would appreciate in value after your death." "What did you say?" questioned the artist. "When I told him it would, he bought all 15 of your paintings." "That's wonderful," the artist exclaimed. "What's the bad news?" "The gentleman was your doctor." It started to snow, the first snow of the season, and the wife and I took our cocktails and sat for hours by the window watching the huge soft flakes drift down from heaven. It looked like a Grandma Moses print, so romantic we felt like newlyweds again. I love snow. We woke to a beautiful blanket of crystal white snow covering every inch of the landscape. What a fantastic sight! Can there be a more lovely place in the whole world? Moving here was the best idea I've ever had. Shoveled for the first time in years and felt like a boy. Again, I did both our driveway and the sidewalks. This afternoon, the snowplow came along and covered up the sidewalks and closed in the driveway. So I got to shovel again. What a perfect life! The sun has melted all our lovely snow. Such a disappointment. My neighbour tells me not to worry. We'll definitely have a white Christmas. No snow on Christmas would be awful. Bob says we'll have so much snow by the end of winter that I'll never want to see snow again. I don't think that's possible. Bob is such a nice man. I'm glad he's our neighbour. Snow, lovely snow. 8 inches last night. The temperature dropped to -20. The cold makes everything sparkle. So the wind took my breath away, but I warmed up by shoveling the driveway and sidewalks. This is the life. The snowplow came back this afternoon and buried everything again. I didn't realize I would have to do quite this much shoveling. But I'll certainly get back in shape this way. I wish I wouldn't huff and puff. So, 20 inches forecast. Sold my van and bought a 4x4 Blazer, bought snow tires for the wife's car, and 2 extra shovels, stocked the freezer. The wife wants a wood stove in case the electricity goes out. I think that's silly. We aren't in Alaska. After all, ice storm this morning. Fell on me on the ice in the driveway. Putting down salt hurt like. The wife laughed for an hour, which I think was very cruel. Still way below freezing, roads are too icy to go anywhere. Electricity was off for 5 hours. I had to pile the blankets on to stay warm. Nothing to do but stare at the wife and try not to irritate her. Guess I should have bought a wood stove but won't admit it to her. God, I hate it when she's right. I can't believe I'm freezing to death in my own living room. Electricity is back on, but had another 14 inches of the stuff last night. More shoveling. Took all day. The snowplow came by twice. Tried to find a neighbor kid to shovel, but they said they're too busy playing hockey. I think they're lying. Called the only hardware store around to see about buying a snowblower, and they're out. Might have another shipment in March. I think they're lying. Bob says I have to shovel, or the city will have it done and bill me. I think he's lying. Bob was right about a white Christmas because 13 more inches of the white. A man is walking along a beach and finds a bottle. When he rubs the bottle, a genie appears and says, "I can grant you one wish." "Well," says the man, "I have never been too fond of flying, so could you make a highway from California to Hawaii?" The genie says, "Do you know how much of my power that would take?" The man says, "Okay, I have never really gotten girls, so could you make that happen?" The genie says, "You want that highway 2-lane or 4-lane?" An old man from Alabama moved to New York and decided to look for work. He walked into a massive department store and asked for a job. The manager, intrigued, asked, "Do you have any sales experience?" The man nodded confidently. "Yes, sir. I was a salesman back home in Alabama." The manager liked his enthusiasm and hired him. "You start tomorrow. I'll check in after we close to see how you did." The first day was tough, but the old man persevered. At the end of the day, the manager came to check on him. "So, how many customers did you sell to?" The man smiled and said, "Just one." The manager was furious. "One? Our salespeople average 20 to 30 customers a day. How much was the sale for?" The old man replied, $121,237.65. The manager's jaw dropped. "What on earth did you sell?" The old man explained. "Well, first I sold him a small fish hook, then a medium fish hook, then a larger one. After that, I sold him a fishing rod. He mentioned going fishing on the coast, so I took him to the boat section, and he bought a twin-engine Boston whaler. Then he realized his Honda Civic couldn't tow it, so I sold him a truck." The manager, still in shock, asked, "A man came in for a fish hook, and you sold him a boat and a truck?" The old man grinned. "No, sir. He actually came in to buy tampons for his wife. I just said, 'Your weekend's shot. You might as well go fishing.'" The next day, the old man got a promotion. There was a woman whose dog snored like a chainsaw. Desperate for a solution, she called the vet. "Try tying a ribbon around his tail," the vet suggested. A bit skeptical but willing to try anything, she dug through her sewing kit, found a red ribbon, and tied it around the dog's bits. Miraculously, the snoring stopped. That night, her husband stumbled home drunk, collapsed onto the bed, and started sawing logs just like the dog. Well, she thought, if it worked for the dog. She grabbed another ribbon, this one blue, and tied it around her husband's Sure enough, silence. A few hours later, the husband groggily woke up to use the bathroom. As he passed the mirror, he spotted the blue ribbon tied around him. Then he glanced over at the dog and saw the red ribbon. Shaking his head, he muttered, "Well, buddy, I don't know what we got into last night, but we took first and second place." 4 older women were gathered around playing bridge when one decided it was time for some honesty. The first lady said, "You know, girls, I've known you all for years, and there's something I need to confess. I'm a kleptomaniac. But don't worry, I've never stolen from you, and I never will. Our friendship means too much." The second lady chimed in. "Well, since we're being honest, I have something to share too. I'm a nymph. But don't worry, your husbands don't interest me at all. You're my dearest friends. The third lady nodded and confessed. All right, it's my turn. But don't worry, you're not my type. I value our friendship too much. The fourth lady stood up, grabbed her purse and said, well, I have a confession too. I'm an uncontrollable gossip, and now I have some calls to make. Honestly, I'm completely messed up now, and my chances of recovery are slim. I can't even open a bathroom door without using a paper towel, nor can I let a waitress put lemon slices in my iced water without worrying about bacteria lurking on the peel. Sitting on a hotel bedspread has become a no-go for me. I can only imagine what might have happened on it since it was last washed. Eating a little snack is a guilt trip, as I dread thinking about how many gallons of trans fats I've consumed over the years. Special thanks for the post about rat droppings in envelope glue. Now I have to use a wet sponge every time I seal an envelope, and I must scrub the top of every can I open too for the same reason. I find it hard to use deodorants that might cause cancer, even though I smell like a water buffalo on a sweltering day. Thanks to your insights, I've sworn off Coca-Cola since I learned it can remove toilet stains. I've also discovered that my prayers only get answered if I tag 7 friends and make a wish within 5 minutes. I can't buy gas anymore without bringing someone along to keep an eye on my car, fearing a serial killer might sneak into the back seat while I'm filling up. I've stopped using cling wrap in the microwave because it supposedly causes 7 types of cancer, and I've learned I can't even boil a cup of water in there anymore without it exploding in my face and disfiguring me for life. Going to the movies is out. I fear being pricked with an AIDS-infected needle when I sit down. Shopping centres are off limits too, as someone might drug me with a perfume sample and rob me. I don't even answer the phone anymore because I might be tricked into dialing a number that leads to an outrageous phone bill with calls to Jamaica, Uganda, Singapore, and Uzbekistan. Gardening has become too risky. I'm terrified of being bitten by a violin spider and losing my hand. If you don't share this post and tag at least 144,000 people within the next 7 minutes, a large dove with diarrhea will land on your head at 5 p.m. tomorrow, and the fleas from 120 camels will infest your back, causing you to grow a hairy hump. I know this is true because it actually happened to a friend of my neighbour's ex-mother-in-law's second husband's cousin's best friend's beautician. Oh, and by the way, a German scientist from Argentina recently discovered, after an extensive study, that people with insufficient brain activity tend to read Facebook with their hand on the mouse. Don't bother taking it off now, it's too late. P.S. I now keep my toothbrush in the living room because I've heard that water splashes more than 6 feet out of the toilet. There lived an old frog who was known far and wide as the foolish old frog. His defining trait was his lack of intelligence. He struggled with almost everything, often acting in a silly manner that made the other animals laugh at him. They called him a fool and a worthless creature, convinced that he would never amount to anything. Despite his low intelligence, the old frog had a heart of gold. He was incredibly kind-hearted, always eager to help others, even if he didn't fully understand their needs. His generosity and compassion knew no bounds, though he was often unaware of the problems others faced. One day, the king of the animal kingdom decided to host a quiz competition to find the smartest animal. He invited the top 5 animals known for their intelligence to participate. The first contestant chosen was the wise dolphin. Next came the smart chimpanzee, followed by the intelligent wolf and the brilliant squirrel. As the other animals prepared for the quiz, some of them decided to mock the old frog. "Let's choose the foolish old frog as the 5th contestant," they said, laughing amongst themselves. "He's just a fool. He'll never be able to answer any of the questions. He'll be humiliated." With the 5 contestants in place, the king stepped forward and announced a life-changing prize for the winner, a sum of money that could transform their life forever. The king asked the first question: "Which mammal is known to have the most powerful bite in the world?" The animals stared at each other in confusion. No one knew the answer. The wise dolphin swam in circles, thinking hard. The smart chimpanzee scratched his head. The intelligent wolf growled in frustration, and the brilliant squirrel nervously twitched its tail. All attempts to answer the question were unsuccessful. Just as the silence grew unbearable, the foolish old frog suddenly shouted, "Hippopotamus!" The king's face lit up and he exclaimed, "Correct! The hippopotamus has the most powerful bite in the animal kingdom." The other animals were stunned. They had underestimated the old frog, and now they felt ashamed of their mockery. They approached him, humbled and remorseful, asking for his forgiveness. One curious animal later asked the old frog, "How did you know the answer to the question?" The old frog smiled and said, "I didn't actually know the answer. It was just luck. I saw the hippopotamus eating my cake, and I shouted his name to make him stop." Thomas, at 32, was still single. One day, a friend asked him, "Why aren't you married? Haven't you found a woman who could make a good wife?" Thomas sighed and replied, "Well, I've found many women I wanted to marry, but every time I bring them home to meet my parents, my mother doesn't approve." His friend thought for a moment and said, "I've got the perfect solution. Just find someone who's exactly like your mother." A few months later, they bumped into each other again, and the friend eagerly asked, "Did you find the right girl? Did your mother like her?" Thomas frowned and replied, "Yes, I found the perfect girl. She was just like my mother. You were right. My mother liked her very much." His friend, relieved, asked, "Then what's the problem?" Thomas replied with a deep sigh, "My father doesn't like her." A man and woman had been married for more than 60 years. They had shared everything. They had talked about everything. They had kept no secrets from each other, except that the little old woman had a shoebox in the top of her closet that she had cautioned her husband never to open or ask her about. For all of these years, he had never thought about the box. But one day, the little old woman got very sick, and the doctor said she would not recover. In trying to sort out their affairs, the little old man took down the shoebox and took it to his wife's bedside. She agreed that it was a time that he should know what was in the box. When he opened it, he found 2 crocheted dolls and a stack of money totaling $95,000. He asked her about the contents. "When we were to be married," she said, "my grandmother told me the secret of a happy marriage was to never argue. She told me that if I ever got angry with you, I should just keep quiet and crochet a doll." The little old man was so moved, he had to fight back tears. Only 2 precious dolls were in the box. She had only been angry with him 2 times in all those years of living and loving. He almost burst with happiness. "Honey," he said, "that explains the doll. But what about all of this money? Where did it come from?" "Oh," she said, "that's the money I made from selling the dolls." In the piece, there's a long passage of about 20 minutes, during which the bass violinists have nothing to do. Rather than sit around that whole time, some bass players decided to sneak off stage and go to the tavern next door for a quick one. After slamming down several beers in quick succession, one of them looked at his watch. "Hey, we need to get back," he said. "No need to panic," said a fellow bass player. "I thought we might need some extra time, so I tied the last few pages of the conductor's score together with string. It'll take him a few minutes to get it untangled." A few moments later, they staggered back to the concert hall and took their places in the orchestra. About this time, a member of the audience noticed the conductor seemed a bit edgy and said as much to her companion. "Well, of course," said her companion. "Don't you see? It's the bottom of the 9th, the score is tied, and the bassists are loaded." An 87-year-old man was having his annual checkup when the doctor asked how he was feeling. "I've never been better," he boasted. "I've got an 18-year-old bride who's pregnant and having my child. What do you think about that?" The doctor considered this for a moment, then said, "Let me tell you a story. I knew a guy who was an avid hunter. He never missed a season. But one day he went out in a bit of a hurry and accidentally grabbed his umbrella instead of his gun." The doctor continued, "So he was in the woods and suddenly a grizzly bear appeared in front of him. He raised up his umbrella, pointed it at the bear and squeezed the handle." "And do you know what happened?" the doctor asked. Dumbfounded, the old man replied, "No, what?" The doctor continued, "The bear dropped dead in front of him." "That's impossible," exclaimed the old man. "Someone else must have shot the bear." The doctor replied, "That's kind of what I'm getting at." A married couple is driving along a highway, doing a steady 40 miles per hour. The husband is behind the wheel. His wife suddenly looks across at him and speaks in a clear voice. "I know we have been married for over 20 years, but I want a divorce." The husband says nothing. He keeps looking at the road ahead, but slowly increases his speed to 45 miles per hour. The wife speaks again. "I don't want you to try to talk me out of it." She says, "Because I've been having an affair with your best friend, and he is a far better lover than you are." Again, the husband stays quiet, but grips the steering wheel more tightly and slowly increases the speed to 55 miles per hour. She pushes her luck. "I want a house," she says. Insistently, up to 60 miles per hour. "I want the car, too." She continues 65 miles per hour, and she says, "I'll have the bank accounts, all the credit cards and the boat." The car slowly starts veering towards a massive concrete bridge. This makes her nervous, so she asks him, "Isn't there anything you want?" The husband at last replies in a quiet and controlled voice. "No, I've got everything I need," he says. "Oh, really?" she inquires. "So what have you got?" Just before they slam into the wall at 65 miles per hour, the husband turns to her and smiles. "The airbag!" A mother and her young son were flying Southwest Airlines from Kansas City to Chicago. the son turned from the window to his mother and asked, "If big dogs have baby dogs and big cats have baby cats, why don't big planes have baby planes?" The mother said, "Well, maybe that's something you could ask the stewardess." So the boy asked the stewardess, "If big dogs have baby dogs and big cats have baby cats, why don't big planes have baby planes?" The stewardess responded, "Did your mother tell you to ask me?" The boy admitted that this was the case. "Well then, tell your mother that there are no baby planes, because Southwest always pulls out on time. You can ask your mother to explain it to you." A store manager, Bob, stopped by a small manufacturing plant. A fire started on some grasslands. And towards the end of the program had already won 500,000 euros. "You've done very well so far," said Chris Tarrant, the show's presenter. "But for €1,000,000, you've only got one lifeline left. Phone a friend. If you get the next question wrong, you'll only get 100,000 euros. Everything is riding on this question. Will you go for it?" "Sure," said Mick. "I'll have a go." Which of the following birds does not build its own nest? A. Sparrow. B. Thrush. C. Magpie. D. Cuckoo. "I haven't got a clue," said Mick. "So I'll use my last lifeline and phone my friend Jessica back home in Dublin." Mick called his friend's phone. "Hello, is this Jessica? I'm calling from Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. I'm sitting here with Mick, and he needs your help to win €1,000,000. Are you ready?" "Sorry, she's not here. This is Jessica's husband, Paddy." Mick was distraught. Paddy wasn't exactly known for being the sharpest tool in the shed. The host said, "According to the rules, this counts as your call no matter who picks up." The host read the question and alternatives aloud. "Mick," cried Paddy. "That's simple. It's a cuckoo. Are you sure?" "I'm sure." Mick hung up the phone and told the host, "I'll go with cuckoo as my answer." "Is that your final answer?" asked the host. "That it is." There was a long pause, and then the presenter screamed, "Cuckoo is the correct answer. Mick, you've won €1,000,000. The next night, Mick went round to Paddy's to buy him a drink. "Tell me, Paddy, how in heaven's name did you know it was the cuckoo that doesn't build its own nest?" "That's easy, because he lives in a block."